so a lot of course leader stuff. So that's a good start. And if anybody's expecting stand-up, now's the time to leave. I've kind of called it this for a reason, and I'll come on to that as we go through. But it's a kind of little working title for a talk, and there's a rationale for it. Oh yes, you've got massive. I do. So the other thing, I put this slide in last night. Just because for anybody who wasn't here yesterday, that will make absolutely no sense. But I kind of thought, well, how do I follow that? I have never sold, and the chances of me ever selling work to David Bowie now, I have to admit, are pretty slim. So I just thought I'd drop that in. So when Andy said, will I do a talk, I was kind of thinking, God, what do I do a talk about? You know, my job has been, and it's been particularly full on for the last few years, course leader and teaching and this, that and the other, and I was thinking, God, I'm the same bill as Michael Johnson, all these different people. I was thinking, well, how do I compete with them? And actually, I suddenly thought, well, actually, I don't need to compete with them. It's not a competition. And the great thing about Conference Week is that you get so many different people giving so many points of view about creativity. And I'd like to think that we're all in the room because we're all passionate about creativity in one sense or another. There's no, you know, it's not about being a graphic designer or an illustrator or a fine artist. We're all here because we're interested. And I can guarantee that 99.9% of people in this room, when they were young, picked up a pencil and absolutely just loved drawing. And I think sometimes we kind of forget that. We sometimes forget just why we actually started down the kind of creative path, and we get wrapped up in making money and getting a degree and getting a job, and that's all fine and that's all part and parcel of it. But at the same time, I think sometimes we just forget about making work and actually the joy of making work as well. So this presentation really is going to be really about my work that I do in the background, purely for me and for the enjoyment of making work. But there'll also be a little bit of a preamble, as with all middle-aged men. You're going to get my little backstory as to how I got to where I got to a little bit as well. You know, I've got to fill in 30 years of doing this, that and the other. So it is going to be about my interest in words and language as well, because I'm particularly interested in words and I'm particularly interested in language, and I'll kind of come on to how that happened. But first, like I was saying, a little bit about how I got to where I am now. So I did my foundation course there, which is Newcastle College. I'm actually a Geordie. I am from Newcastle. Probably tell by the accent. Probably not. And it's the closest thing to a prison that I've ever been in. It's bleak, both on the outside and the inside. But it was a fantastic foundation course. I learned an awful lot. And it was that opportunity to try all the different subjects. It was a great opportunity. And I ended up deciding on graphic design. I'm not quite sure why I decided on graphic design. I think I probably had a little bit of a prod from my parents going, you'll get a job if you do graphic design, etc., etc., etc. So I did do that, and I did that, and then it was kind of, where am I going to study my degree? Where do I want to go? And I had friends that came here to do back in the late 80s, early 90s. Friends that went to Central St Martin's, I had friends that went, you know, all over the country. And I decided I wanted to go to Edinburgh. So I applied and got into Edinburgh College of Art. Couldn't be a more different building to what was Strangeways, or close to. So it was this massive neoclassical building. It's full of sculptures. That's the sculpture court on the right-hand side. This massive sort of atrium. The studios were all the way around the outside. They were huge. They were big painter studios, and we had a graphic design studio, which was a big painter studio, but it's been kind of subdivided and all kind of thing. It was a fantastic place to study, but it was a phenomenally different course to the one that you guys are on. It was really more kind of fine art crossed with graphic design, and it taught me how to think, taught me to be very independent. I would question how much it actually taught me about graphic design, but it was just a brilliant place to be. It was a proper art college, fantastic parties. It had its own bar, and it was great, you know. But like I say, I questioned how much I actually did about graphic design, but I'll come on to that. But while I was there, I was kind of exposed to all this work, and you know, I will give you part of this talk that I'm going to give is full of little bits of advice and things that I've kind of picked up as I've gone along, and things that I would kind of pass on to you guys. You can, you know, it's up to you whether you want to take things on or not, but you know, I want to kind of pass on little bits of advice as I go along. But I was introduced to work like Joseph Cannell on the left-hand side, Jenny Holzer on the right. I'd never seen this stuff before. This was kind of mind-blowing stuff. And painters like Robert Motherwell, abstract expressions. This was all stuff that I'd never come across before, and it kind of blew my mind when I was art college. I wanted to be all these people. I wanted to be Jenny Holzer. I wanted to be Robert Motherwell. I wanted to be Joseph. I just wanted to make work like that because I was blown away by it. I'd never seen stuff like this before. That painting is huge. That's the size of the studio, and it was you know, amazing. And so I kind of followed my own path while I was there, and got to the end, put my degree show up, and I was reviewed in the list, which is Scotland's premier entertainment and arts thing, so I was reviewed, and this is what they said. They said, anarchic, abstract and involving, Harker's work applies his own distinctive approach to the context of graphic design. I was not kidding there. Using a piece by a dyslexic poet, he has designed a series of posters for the London Underground, all of which have to be read before a meaning can be worked out. I don't make out a meaning. Other pieces in his show included games which he's designed, journeys which he's devised and recorded on cassette, along with instructions for drawing, stamp design, and a piece which evokes the heartbeat of the earth. Possibly the most pretentious graphic design show ever. And I can guarantee nobody else has seen a graphic design show with a metronome in a box, buried in soil, ticking away. That's my graphic design degree show. But it was reviewed, and it was anarchic, abstract and involving. So that's great. But as you can see, there's a picture of a stamp there, and I did do a little bit of graphic design for stamps. And I've included these for a reason. This was the RSA. Now, back in the day, the RSA and D&AD kind of held equal standing, I suppose. So the RSA was the Royal Society of Arts, and they always ran a stamp brief, and I entered it. And this was, it was based on collectibles from what I remember. And I remember not doing much work for it for a while, and then thinking, shit, I'm going to have to get on with this. And I ended up driving up to the north of Scotland. I don't know why, I think it just went on a bit of a jolly with a mate. And so we drove up to the north of Scotland and basically just drank for a few days and had a bit of a wander around. And it was great. And then I suddenly thought, shit, I'm going to have to do something. The idea was to collect information. So basically just collected a load of stuff. And I came back, I was like, what am I going to do with this? So the idea was to kind of create these kind of, based on collecting information, so to do with flora and fauna and all this kind of thing. Really before Photoshop was any good. So what I had to do was build a wooden box. I could slide glass plates in, screen print them onto the glass plates, and between each glass plate, put little bits and pieces, get a rostrum camera and photograph them from above. Anyway, it won. Well, it was shortlisted, and I had to go down to London. I had to sit in front of about 12 people in a meeting. It was quite intense, but anyway, it won £1,000. And back in 1990, I'm going to say that's a lot of money. But what it was a travel bursary, effectively. And I'd always, I hadn't travelled much at that point. I'd been to Paris on a sort of student thing. Never been abroad with my folks because they didn't believe in going abroad. So it was kind of new, and it was quite exciting because I was thinking, God, I can go somewhere now. So I'd always wanted to go to Czechoslovakia or the Czechoslovak Republic. I don't know why, but I've been fascinated by Czech and Slovakian literature. I've read quite a lot. And at art college, prior to art college, I never really read that much. I read Asterix and Tintin and stuff like that. When I went to art college, I became an intellectual overnight. And I started reading books, and I became absolutely fascinated with just reading and with language and all this kind of thing. And this was somewhere I really wanted to go. I'd become kind of spellbound by some of the literature. These are some of the books, Harabel's Too Loud a Solitude. If you've never read that, and I guess most people here probably have never have, it's a beautiful book, and I totally recommend it. Tibor Fisher Under the Frog, that political book, Hashek, it's a bit of a sort of farce, that one. But those are just 3 books that I'd read, and I was kind of becoming fascinated by Czech literature, basically, and my interest in language, really. And it gave me an opportunity to go there, and I went there for about 6 weeks, I think. I had enough money to basically just mosey around. My girlfriend at the time came for a couple of weeks, and then she went back to work, and I just carried on travelling for about another 4 weeks. And like I say, I started collecting things, tickets and just whatever I could find. I was fascinated because I hadn't really travelled that much. I wasn't, and you go somewhere new and you kind of see a train ticket and wow, it's amazing. It's just kind of, bloody hell, look, it's cardboard train tickets, who'd have thought? But they were just beautiful things. And, you start to collect these things and you start to notice these little things. So I came back with all of this stuff and just started putting it into sketchbooks. Just to make up a sketchbook and just to see what I could do, start laying stuff up and this and that. But I wanted to do more with it. I wanted to start to explore just language visually. And I think this next step was the kind of start of what I do and what I'm still interested in. So I took very small things and made them very big. So these are massive paintings, massive. The one on the right hand side is about 4 foot square, and the one on the left is about 8 foot by 4, something like that. They're quite big. They're big paintings, and I just like the idea of messing with scale, and I like the idea of exploring texture and colour and all this kind of thing. And I think secretly I've always wanted to be a painter, or a visual artist, not a graphic designer. But there you go. And I just loved it, and it became something I just really wanted to explore more of. And you could take all this language and you could abstract it and you could put it back into things. And it didn't have to mean anything, but it was kind of about collecting, and it was kind of about recontextualising, I suppose. And there's a few more. That's the one on the left is based on Spanish graffiti. I spent some time in Barcelona, I think. And the other ones, I can't remember what the context for those was, but again, they were big things. And I love the idea of putting typography over the top of texture and colour and all these kind of things. I was kind of fascinated by it, really. So I started making all this work and trying to get exhibitions and trying to get my work out there, and this was as well as trying to be a graphic designer. I'd just going back to the finishing my degree. Although it wasn't a traditional graphic design show. I remember at the degree show, an agency came up to me and said, "We love your work. We want you to do our Christmas card." I was like, "Oh, great, brilliant, we can do Christmas card." So I did this Christmas card for them, and it was edgy, and it was photocopied angels, and it was this, that, and the other, and it was torn, and I put Omicron on, and this, that, and the other. I really liked it, and they looked at it and went, "We want people to think we're creative, not off our heads." And I was like, right, okay. And that was the first time I suddenly thought, shit, if I am going to be a graphic designer, I'm really going to have to knuckle down and learn a little bit about graphic design, and I can't be that self-indulgent. So I did, and I started working as a graphic designer, but I was still self-indulgent in the background. And I think for me, that was really important. I needed to keep making work that, meant something to me. So a little bit of advice that we have every now and again, these little things crop up, these little screens, and collect things. Doesn't matter what it is, it doesn't have to be tickets, it can be poems, it can be whatever you want. It can be absolutely anything, but collect stuff that interests you and archive it and keep it. You never know when you might use it. Collect ringtones. But then I got into travelling, so I spent several months in South America, in Patagonia, but I kept a sketchbook with me. Not to draw graphic design, not to draw type, but just to draw. So these were a couple of rodeos that were kind of half constructed and bits of landscape. But again, it was about just keeping looking. It doesn't matter what I was looking at, and making drawings, I suppose, from that sort of thing. So another piece of advice: travel, even if it's just half an hour on the local bus to somewhere you've never been. And that kind of, Peter mentioned that yesterday, and the importance of actually just going places you've not been before. It doesn't just because somebody says, "Oh, I travel," or it doesn't mean you have to go to the other side of the world. It's not about, you know, look where I've been and all this kind of thing. It's about just seeing stuff in a new way, or going somewhere you haven't been. You know, I can guarantee within 10 miles circumference there'll be loads of places you've never been, and sometimes it's just good to go and see them. You never know what you're going to find. So again, everything is about broadening your experiences and broadening your horizons, if you like. So don't feel, when people say, you know, I've travelled, it's not about how far you've gone, it's not about how exotic the location was, it's about what you take from it, and that's really important. So, when I was in Edinburgh, I was introduced to this guy. Sorry, just on the screen. This is a guy called Rodney Relax. Okay, good name. And Rodney had been in a band called Alternative, punk band. They'd done one album called If They Treat You Like Shit, Act Like Manure. And it's a really good album for anybody who's into punk. It is a good album. But Rodney was a writer as well, a poet, and just a really interesting guy. I was introduced to him, and we went for a beer and we were chatting, and he showed me some of his writing and stuff like that. I said, that's great, that's really good. And I showed him some of the work that I'd been doing, and he really liked it. And we kind of struck up a friendship, and it was like, well, you know, what are we going to do? You know, can we do something? You know, and he knew lots of writers, local writers, and he knew, you know, all kinds of people. And it was just like, well, why don't we sort of set up an event? And we did. We created this club called the Yellow Cafe. So basically, it ran for quite a few years. We sort of set it up in bars around Leith in Edinburgh. It was, you know, some of the rougher bars, but it was good fun. And the idea was to get writers and poets and performers, along with DJs and along with visual artists, and to just kind of create this kind of atmosphere. And it became quite popular in its own way. You know, this was a review in the Scotsman, which, you know, Scotland's biggest newspaper, I think. But the bar is crowded, the joint is jumping, and the music is thumping. Claire Smith visits a new nightclub in the capital and finds a thriving cafe culture devoted to anarchic poetry. So there's that word anarchic again, so anarchic somewhere down the line. But it was brilliant, and so we worked with kind of, you know, that's Sandy Craigie on the in the picture there. She was a writer from Cowgate in Edinburgh, and so we have everybody from people like Irving Welsh. You know, if you don't know Irving Welsh, Trainspotting, Acid House, Magnus, all that kind of thing. James Kelman, How Late It Was, How Late, etc. Through to kind of just open mic spots as well, but there was some fantastic writing going on in Edinburgh. It was all very underground, it was all quite edgy. They were not middle class poets in any way, shape or form. The only middle class person there was probably me. But my kind of role in this was to create the posters and to create the identity for it. And it was quite interesting because we had no budget, absolutely no budget whatsoever. So I bought the paper, and that was the only expense. I was still allowed to use the print workshop at Edinburgh College of Art because they knew me there, I'd been in there loads before, and they were just like, yeah, you can use it, just go in and use it. So I would turn up on usually a Thursday evening, I think, around about 5ish, 4:30, 5 o'clock, with my ream of paper, a list of who was performing. Sometimes I would have a kind of copy line, sometimes I wouldn't. And I would then just make these posters up on the evening. I'd be there till about 11:30, 12. I would then leave with this stack of posters that were still a bit tacky. I'd meet Rodney outside, we'd go for a couple of beers, and then he'd wander off and start putting them up. Just I was in Edinburgh Road until 3, 4, 5 in the morning. So he would kind of wander off from there. So these were done very, very quickly. And this was the kind of identity. So, for example, Crash Course, he gave me that headline, and he gave me who was playing. I never knew what the posters were going to look like before I started. I had no idea. I had the information, and I would go in there. I would have enough to do about 5 or 10 kind of proofs, or at least have 5 or 10 mistakes. After that, we had to live with whatever we had to live with. So the We Are Ecstasy one actually came from, we were invited to do some events in the Assembly Rooms in Edinburgh, which is quite a big and prestigious council building. It's quite a sort of ornate place. But the council got a bit nervous and tried to pull it because of all the drug references and all the drug taking and all this kind of stuff. So just because they tried to pull it, we did a series of posters that said "We Are Ecstasy," and that really didn't go down particularly well. But I did quite like the poster, and we still did the gig, even though they kept taking them down. But they were all hand printed. None of this is lithograph. None of this is reproduced. It's all done on letterpress, so flatbed press, wood and metal type, arranging it, printing it, moving it around, trying to work out the design as I went along. 327 speech, he gave me that one. All Bets Are Off Chuck was a response to the death of an author called Charles Bukowski, or Bukowski, never know how you pronounce it. But again, you know, there's sort of themes that run through, but it had to be done really quickly. Sometimes I had absolutely no idea what I was going to do, and I would be walking to the print workshop thinking, I have not got a clue what the headline's going to be. So the one on the left, just past the bookies, and it was just like, well, it's current. Man United 2-5 to win, 5-2 to win the the Premier League. Newcastle and Liverpool. I'm a Newcastle fan. Sadly, they didn't win, but it's current, and I quite liked it. You know, it's again sometimes because the nature of the club was that it was immediate and that it was current. It was, you know, sometimes it was just quite a good thing to do. The PBYC was a postage mark from a poll tax bill. So again, you know, sometimes you just look for something and you just find it quite quickly and you go with it. You know, somebody else in the system, I think, was something that I'd heard on Crime Watch. I mean, sometimes these things it was just like, shit, what we can do? Quite like that, right, I'll bank that and I'll use it. That goes back to collecting. Things that you've heard, collect things. You never know when you might use them. So anyway, we did all these posts. I've only got a small amount of them, so I did loads of them. But we would do it, you know, between 60 and 100. Depending on how much money we had for paper and all this kind of stuff, and I'd try and recoup the cost back on the door and stuff just to get the money back. But it was all about making type and images, and it was kind of very fitting for what it was. So, piece of advice, there we go, another piece of advice. It's important to work quickly and not overthink things. Not all the time, but a lot of the time, it is important to work quickly and not to overthink things. So, see where we are. So, I mentioned reading. I'm absolutely obsessed with reading books and finding new authors and this, that and the other. And these are just some of the authors that I particularly liked, and you know, if you get a chance, I'd encourage you to read them. Charles Bukowski, Pulp, William Burroughs. William Burroughs, fascinating. Don't know why the one's gone black in the bottom corner. It's supposed to be P.G. Wodehouse, but it's gone black. Invisible Cities by Calvino. If you've never read that, read it. Brilliant. But one book that absolutely blew me away was Underworld by Don DeLillo. Now this is a massive book, it's about 800 pages. It's kind of the sort of second great American novel, I suppose, really. It's sort of set after the Cold War up to the late 90s, and it's just a massive landscape of America, really. And it's a fascinating book, and the prose is unbelievable. And I was utterly blown away by this. So I ended up producing an exhibition of paintings purely based on that. I could only find 2 of them. I sold most of them, and I found the images from these, but there was another six paintings. Now these are oil paintings. I don't know why they're oil paintings, but they are oil paintings. So yeah, not often you see typography as oil paintings, but there we go. So I kind of created these kind of typographic landscapes based on this book that I'd read, but I was utterly blown away with it, and I wish I could find more of the images, but. This was me just, you know, I've got my real job, I've got my job where I'm trying to earn money as a graphic designer or an illustrator or, you know, whatever it was, but this is about me working through and giving myself the kind of, I don't know, the sort of feed that I need. I can't work just doing a certain kind of thing. I need to be doing stuff for me, otherwise it's kind of, I find it frustrating. So you can't underestimate the value of reading. You can't underestimate the value of reading because it triggers imagination. It triggers the brain. You know, it's great watching stuff. And I love film and, you know, music as well. It's another great thing. You know, I was fascinated by Bob Dylan and Nick Drake and Pavement and all these different bands. With, you know, Tom Waits. All these people that use language in a really interesting way as well. So. You know, the value of reading and listening to stuff is you know, it triggers things and it kind of allows you to respond to things. So you know, there's nothing wrong with watching stuff as well, it's important, but I would really, really encourage you to pick up books, to go to second-hand bookshops. You know, I used to spend hours in record shops just looking for stuff as well. I threw this in because there's a little bit of advice after this. I got because I was working as an illustrator as well as a designer and doing bits and pieces. And there's a magazine called Graphics International. I don't know whether it still exists or not. It was quite a big publication back in the day. And anyway, I was kind of featured in this, and the thing was, right, so it said, for a while it looked as if illustration was going the way of the dodo, but the last few months have seen a phoenix-like rise from the ashes. Charlotte Rivers tracked down 10 of the most talented. Brilliant. Stare around. Alongside 10 of the most, well, alongside 9 of the most talented illustrators. It was the utter death knell for my illustration career. I have no idea what happened after that. Even the woman who was doing it, she rang me up to say, I love your work, I think it's the best one in there, you're going to do brilliantly. Show what she knew. It was a fucking disaster. As far as that went. And it was, and I don't know why it stopped to this day. I've done stuff for VW, I've done stuff for Great Ormond Street, I've done stuff for Independent, various stuff. I don't know what happened, but it was the death knell. So it was just like, well, do you know what? You can't take it personally. It's industry. And I think the fact, as long as you're still happy in yourself and you don't take it too personally, think, well, that's the end of the world, I'm going to give up, then I think that's really important. So I kind of dusted myself down and just thought, well, stuff it. So I just went back to making sketchbook work. I just went back to sketchbooks and just thought, you know what? I'm just gonna make some work. I'm not gonna worry about it. Because I was never that fussed about trying. It was never about trying to make a fortune or become a millionaire doing this. I do it because I enjoy doing it, and I get something out of doing it. So I went back to sketchbooks and just started messing around. And sketchbooks for me sometimes are about writing things down and trying to work things out. But sometimes it's literally about having a space just to play with things like composition and colour and all that kind of thing. So I just started messing around and started doing little bits of drawing again and thinking, okay, I want to get back into drawing. I want to get back into little bits of type. I want to, so messing around with just stuff. And creating these kind of things. So, yeah, another piece of advice, use sketchbooks just to make unrelated stuff. Can't remember what I put in this presentation as I go along. So yeah, use sketchbooks to make unrelated stuff. Don't feel that everything that you do has to have some great meaning to it, or has to be, some kind of, I don't know, great piece of work or life-changing piece of work. Just make stuff. You've got to feed yourself somehow, and you can't do that purely through trying to make profit. There's a great quote in the book that we did, the Words of Wisdom book, which is, do it for love and money will follow. Not might follow, but do it for love anyway, because that's really important. We're all creative people, and we all started being creative for a love of it. Don't forget that. I said that already. So then I was speaking to a friend of mine, Sarah, and she said, you know what, you should try screen printing. It would really suit your work. So I was thinking, right. So I did. So I started screen printing, and it was kind of, I just kind of came up for reasons to do it. So that was 11 years of the Yellow Cafe, turned it up to 11. So the middle one ringside and the one on the left, I'd drawn a picture of the Lone Range, I don't know why, and so I decided to screen print it, put some time with it. And Cosmopolitan Scum, somebody told me that phrase, and I thought it was a brilliant phrase for creating a print called Cosmopolitan Scum. You can kind of date it by the fact it's got Burberry in it. But again, that it does seem to suit the way that I work, that kind of very frantic, kind of scribbly thing. The Queen's Techno. Again, some of this is going back to some of the poems that I'd worked with Rodney on some of the stuff. So that these two are a response to a couple of his poems, Queen's Techno. I can't actually remember what the one on it wasn't called Blue Rain. I can't remember what it was called. But again, these are responses, and I would always start with words. I'd always start with the words and then build these things around them. And they were never planned to look like anything specifically. Again, it's kind of the way that I work is to kind of put these things together. A couple more, Electro Squad and Shell Suits Frozen in Flight. But again, this, you can kind of get a theme for the way that I work. And like I say, I think I am ultimately a frustrated painter. But I enjoy making stuff like this. And I think I've done these prints and I was thinking I want to do something for someone as well. So there we go. That's my daughter. That's the sort of sympathy vote. So my wife wrote the book and I illustrated it because I was thinking, I'd love to do. I've always been interested in kids' books. I always loved kids' books. I started buying kids' books before we had Edie. And I was thinking, I wouldn't do a kids' book. And Nick was like, well, I'll write it, you can illustrate it, and give it to Edie for, I think she was about 4 then. So that was about 6 years ago, 6, 7 years ago. And it was called The Chicken Spy, and it was all screen printed again. So didn't do it for any other reason other than I just wanted to do something for Edie, and I wanted to use what I could do and make this book for her. So there's a few spreads here just to give you a feel for it. So it's a chicken, basically, he wanted to be great, he wanted to be a spy, all his mates laughed at him, he wasn't overly chuffed about that, he got quite angry about that. So he was going to run away, and he built hides so that he could hide from the fox, and watched the fox, and he suddenly found the fox go back, oh my god, I'm going to have to wake all my mates up because they were asleep, and the fox was heading towards them, and so you get the gist. I mean, it's not intellectual in any way, shape, or form. But it was a fun thing to do, and it was nice just to explore narrative and actually a story as much as anything else. There we are, he's kind of hiding behind his newspaper there, and he's spying, kind of get up, and then he runs off, and unhappy farmer, fox hiding, you get the gist. And then he saves the day, and they're all very happy, which is great. And there he goes, tracking down his next case, I think, was the end of it. But you get the gist. And it was, again, just me having a bit of fun. Do something for someone for the love of it. Don't forget. It's not all about making money. It really isn't, and it's about, realising just how much you get from doing stuff. How, I remember when I started drawing when I was kind of, 9, 10, 11 and all those kind of age, and you'd make a drawing and you'd be so proud of it and you'd want to show people, and you didn't want to sell it, that wasn't the point, you did it because you loved it. And then you kind of want to give it to someone, whether they wanted it or not, but you kind of want to give it, you can have this, and you can but it is that kind of pride and that kind of joy and stuff like that, so I think that's really important. But sometimes it doesn't go according to plan, and for a while I got really stuck. I just couldn't make any work. I hit a complete brick wall, and I couldn't work out why. That was me. I was not happy, couldn't work out, and for quite some time I was kind of thinking, why am I not able to make any work? I'd start stuff and I don't like it, why am I doing this, And I'd lost confidence completely. I mean, kind of the reason I wanted to bring this up was because I speak to a lot of students at times where they lose confidence. And I just want to kind of reassure people it's completely natural. You can't be at the top of your game all the time. You can't always produce work. It is natural to lose confidence for a variety of different reasons. I think one of the reasons I lost confidence was that I work with a lot of very creative people, a lot of very talented people, both here and outside. And I think I'm starting to compare myself to people. And I'm starting to think, shit, they're better than me. Or, wow, how have we done that? Or I wish I could do that. And I think I started to kind of think, am I just doing the same thing over and over again? And then I started to kind of really lose kind of faith with what I was doing. And what happened at that point was I just stopped doing work. I was getting a bit fed up, and we were around at a friend's house, and I had a few beers, and he was trying to persuade me to do an Ironman. Now, I don't know if anybody knows what an Ironman is, but it's a triathlon. It's 140 miles. It's 2.5 miles swim, 112 mile bike, and a marathon. And by the end of the night, I'd kind of gone, yeah, easy, no, great. And then the next day my wife went, you do remember that you kind of basically signed up to do this. I was like, shit, okay. But I did. And I started training. I did my first triathlon when I was 48. I did my first Ironman when I was 49. And I've done a lot of kind of fairly extreme races since. I've got a couple of ultramarathons this year, mountain ones. And that's not me showing off. This is, what it did do is it kind of gave me a sense of perspective, and it gave me something to do out with the kind of world of creativity. It gave me an outlet, it gave me space to shuffle stuff around. If I go out on a run, I can shuffle things around, I can work out why things aren't right, why things are going well or not going well, how are you going. And you know, a good piece of advice for anyone is there will always be someone who you think is better than you. Not necessarily better than you, but who you think is better than you. Don't judge yourself against people, but also give yourself that space to do stuff that's purely for you, that has absolutely no impact on anybody else, but it is space for you, because everybody needs it. In the world that we live in, we are constantly bombarded with stuff. So if you can find that little bit of space, just to give yourself that little bit of a break, then great. It's really important. So, I'm not very funny. So this is a little project that I'm working on at the moment. It's very early days, it's embryonic. And I'll tell you how it came about. So, what happened, I was walking into the studio one day, and I think Ted was chatting to one of the final year students, and the first thing I heard her say was, "But I'm just not very funny." And I was thinking at the time, that's quite an odd thing to say. But again, it comes back to my interest in kind of just words and language and taking things out of context and this, that and the other. And it would have been to do with, you know, humour in design at the end of the day, and how we use humour in design. It just sort of triggered something. I just remember thinking, that's quite interesting. So I kept a little notebook, and unfortunately, I don't keep it with me all the time, and I must have missed hundreds of these sort of just things that I want to write down. But I have captured some of them, and it is something that I'm going to keep as an ongoing project for however long it needs to go on for, quite a while. But anyway, I started kind of, I'm just working things up, and it's just kind of, well, they're a bit nondescript, but just, you know, I'm not very funny in a slightly jaunty typeface, I'm not very funny in a kind of slightly strange landscape typeface, but just starting to explore things. But I was thinking, well, that's not right. So I went back to sketchbooks, again, just the idea of, you know, the importance of sketchbooks can't be underestimated, and just start chopping things up and going back to the way that I kind of felt was the right way to work. Again, going back to just, doesn't matter what it said, it was just, you know, using words and just slicing things up. And I came back with this. So I like the idea of having this kind of dual layer. So the idea of this flat austere typeface, or this kind of plain typeface, with this little bit of kind of humour or jauntiness underneath, so this kind of double layered thing. So that was the one that I probably spent the most time on, and then screen printed it. And I tried a couple of different colours, so I'm not very funny. You've got this, and so there's a blue and a black, there's also a black and a silver. So again, just exploring this idea of language and just trying to make them into nice pieces without trying to hammer anything home. But like I say, at the end of each of these little ones, there's a little bit of advice, and then I'm finished. So when we talk about wit and humour in design, it doesn't mean you need to be a comedian, but good design, whether it's illustration or whether it's graphic design, if you can use humour to a greater or a lesser extent, it connects with people. And I think that's what we talk about when we talk about humour in design. It's not about being a comedian or throwing a pie in someone's face or falling over in a banana skin or anything like that. It is just about connection and creating connections with people, and sometimes making them smile, they'll remember it. But that was the starting point to this little project. There we are. It looks smaller on screen. Now, I don't know how many times I've heard this. And it's every year with the project that's on the wall at the moment. The amount of, I mean, I would have retired years ago. It looks smaller on screen. Yep, it does. But again, I screen printed this, and this has gone into the raffle, so it's a limited edition screen print. The idea really is that if you do win it, frame it tight to the type. But obviously a little bit of paper, the paper's a bit bigger than that. So So that's in the raffle, but it looks more. I wouldn't humour these. It's nice, everybody laughs. So it's kind of doing its job, isn't it, in that respect? But it's about advice as well, isn't it? So it looks smaller on screen, and I think that the premise of this is don't be seduced by pixels. Print stuff out. It always looks great on screen. It's high definition for a start. You know, things always look amazing on screen, but you print them out, and it's always a little bit kind of not quite what I was expecting. So don't be seduced by pixels. Right, welcome to the weird world of conversations that we sometimes have. These are both based on packaging. I'll give you a minute to read this if you want. You don't get right angles in trifles, do you? I don't know. I don't look at trifles. I don't like them. So that took ages to set, by the way, because I scanned in each letter individually and then moved them around, and it took a long time to do. And even the little garnish in the middle of the trifle is made out of exclamation marks from that typeface. But, and there's a much more succinct version of that on the next one, which is, I don't like sausages. That I didn't spend a lot of time on that one, as you can probably tell. I did it on Sunday lunchtime thinking, shit, I need a second one to back it up. But the idea, the premise behind this is, it doesn't really matter what you get as a subject in a brief, particularly at college, because, you know, it's not your job to like or dislike the product. It's your job to be creative. Yeah, and sometimes, you know, I'll find students come going, I've got this and I hate this subject, can I change? Can I change? No, that's not the point. You know, real life is not going to give you every job that you've ever wanted. You're going to end up having to do jobs that you don't like, for clients that you don't particularly like. Sometimes you'll get dream jobs, but a lot of the time, to earn money, and let's face it, we all need to put food on the table and pay the rent or the mortgage. You know, you're going to have to work. And, you know, Michael Johnson yesterday talking about, you know, the fintech and, you know, all the fizzy drink stuff, and, you know, he wouldn't do all that kind of stuff, which is utterly understandable. And, you know, design should make a difference, but it's not always as easy as that. So you have to be prepared to take on jobs that you don't like. I mean, it's fine if you've got ethical issues, and I would never do stuff for companies that did animal testing or anything like that. I was against that, so if I knew that, I wouldn't touch them. But if it's just, I don't like sausages, or trifles just don't do it for me, then you're going to have to get over that, frankly. So when you get subjects that you're not particularly keen on, embrace them. You know, pretend that you know nothing about them, go back into them, and I can guarantee you'll find something way more creative. So, there we go. And maybe next time I do this thing, I'll have the I don't like trifles printed. I want to put colour into that one, and that can be in the reference. Yeah. Right, is this going to work? Read that. Right, I put that in for everybody over 50 in the room. It's that kind of. This one I think is particularly important as just a bit of advice, and there's 3 of them. So I'm inspired by this. This is what people have said to me, and I've kind of thought at the time, what? Even though I've known what they're talking about, I've kind of listened to them. Have you heard yourself? So I'm inspired by anything as long as it sticks out. Right. Okay. I've spent a lot of time looking into graves. Kind of creepy. And how much can you play around with the Queen? Which is quite frankly treasonable, I think. But the rationale behind this is, you know, it's a bit of fun, and we all say things that don't quite come out right, and that's the nature of these things. But there's a couple of reasons for why I kind of put these things in. Firstly, if you're going for an interview, or if you're pitching to a client, if you say something like, I've spent a lot of time looking into graves, the first thing they're going to do is call security. The second thing they're going to do is wonder who on earth they've employed or they're about to employ. And you know what you need. You know, I'm inspired by anything as long as it sticks out. It's a bit, you know, as the actress said to the bishop, and how much can you know, play around with the quid? You know what you mean. In this one, it was to do with stamp design and where can I put the head of the Queen. But if you think a little bit more about what you're trying to say, it will come across correctly. So rather than saying I'm inspired by anything as long as it sticks out, you know, you're talking about, you know, you're inspired by work that, you know, leads the pack, that's different, that is, you know, that is breaking the mold, that kind of thing. I spent a lot of time looking into grade, really weird. But it's all to do with, you know, looking at the typography, researching iconography, researching the history of these kind of things. So it's, and once you get into the habit of kind of thinking a little bit more about what you say, not only will it come across better to you, whoever you're talking to, whether it be a client or a prospective employer or this, that and the other, you will think more clearly about your own work as well. You won't rush it, it won't be lazily thought through, okay? Because you have forced yourself to kind of say, well, what is it I'm actually trying to say? And if you can really kind of cement that, then you'll be a lot clearer about what the rationale for your own work is. So I think that's really important. You know, don't just, we all do it, I mean, I'm as guilty as anybody else, but, you know, try, when you're presenting your work and when you're talking about your work, try to really think about what you mean and say it in a way that's really appropriate. So, consider what you say and the way you say it. And then I think, got one last piece, I think. Yeah, and it doesn't really fit the vernacular, but I did it anyway, because it's something that we hear all the time. It looked better in my head. And yeah, I mean, you can tell how much time I spent on this one, but I do think it's, you know, it's interesting because this happens a lot as well. This is you know, come up against this hard, you know, it looked great in my head and I did it and it was shit, and it was just like, well, so what? You can't think things into existence. You can only develop them. So you've got an idea in your head, you know, you do it. It probably won't work first time, chances are it won't, you know. It never does, but the more iterations you do and the more you're prepared to not lose faith and the more you're prepared to keep with it, then the better it's going to get. So ultimately, don't give up after the first attempt. Sounds a bit trite, but don't give up after the first attempt. You're at university, you're at college, you've got that safety net, you've got the, you know, the chance to make mistakes and learn, and if you think that graphic designers or illustrators just get up in the morning and produce genius work after genius work, they don't. They spend most of the time with their head in their hands, throwing stuff in the bin, going, God, what am I doing with my life? But it's the nature of the beast. You know, if you don't give up and you're prepared to kind of work through it, you will, you know, end up with good work. You know, trust your instincts, because you're all creative people. You're all here for a reason. You've all got talent. You know, so hopefully some of that advice is pertinent. Hopefully some of it's useful. The great thing about conference week is that, like I said right at the start, you've got lots of different people giving lots of different advice. It's up to you. It's like a smorgasbord. It's like a smorgasbord of advice. You pick and choose from the bits that are pertinent to you. It helps frame who you are. Hopefully there might be one or two little bits in there that are of interest. If not, at least you know I'm from Newcastle and I am anarchic. So there we go.
Really lovely.
Thank you very much. Andy's not going to let me take any questions.
Well, go on.
Well, I don't know. Go on. 3 questions. If anybody's got any questions, you might not have any questions. It's fine if you don't. I will not be offended.
Well, should we have a break? If anybody else got a break?
Oh, there's a question. It wouldn't be you, would it?
I just wondered if you'd ever thought about monetising your children's books that you made for your daughter.
Monetising the book?
Yeah, you and your wife. Getting it published.
I kind of toyed with the idea.
Because I think it looks quite interesting.
I toyed with the idea and we didn't, frankly. I don't know, I'd love to